Thanks for the time. So many things to talk to you about, but let us begin with your story on the University of Tennessee. Good afternoon, and tell us what you know.
Yes, as a source put it to me who has some familiarity with this case, prepare for a firefight of epic proportion between the NCAA and the university and the Spire Group, which is the collective, runs the collective, the Vol Club, volunteer club that has run the NIL efforts for Tennessee. So this has been described to me as quote-unquote major, quote-unquote big. So the scope of the violations could be considerable. The level of violations that could be alleged is expected to be level 1, level 2, which is the most significant kind and yield the biggest penalties. And in response, Tennessee is ready to fight fire with fire. The big problem for Tennessee here is this is, as you noted, the second case back-to-back. They just settled the previous case in the summer with 18 level 1 violations related to Jeremy Pruitt's time. This is a different case altogether, and Tennessee is fighting this vigorously with good reason because the penalties up to a potential lack of institutional control charge could be significant.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that because by now everybody has seen Donde Plowman's statement, and there's no question she was at the vanguard of that investigation, and she took a lot of heat for standing up, but she also got praise for it. But help me understand this, the lack of institutional control. And in her statement, Pat, she points out that the same group, not the same group, but the Committee on Infraction was praising her leadership just 6 months ago, and now they're coming after her. There was almost an inference there that we are now untouchable because you praised us. I realize that's not what she's saying, but am I wrong to try to read something? I realize your job isn't to read into her statement, but what did you make out of her statement?
Yeah, first of all, it was fiery for sure. Secondly, yeah, I think that basically Tennessee is trying to say, hey, we handled our business, and now you're saying we didn't handle our business. Well, yeah, that can be true because this is a totally separate thing. And I think the NCAA, without knowing specifics, because they have not issued a formal notice of allegations, that doesn't mean there hasn't been a draft notice or at least extensive communication between the school and the NCAA of what exactly they're facing. But if they come back and say, yeah, okay, yeah, you did a nice job getting rid of Jeremy Pruitt and unearthing this stuff, that doesn't mean you were doing a nice job of policing your collective, so to speak. So if you've got one major investigation going on resulting in significant penalties and then other stuff is going on at the same time, that would seem to open you up to a potential lack of institutional control. But again, Tennessee is going to fight back and say, first of all, who can even understand the NIL rules? And secondly, we did the best we could to follow them, and you're now unfairly trying to make us a poster child, if you will, for trying to get that horse back in the barn.
And Pat, there's also a difference in leadership at the AD's level. Philip Fulmer was the AD of record during the allegations. He stepped down, as we all know, even though he got a nice buyout, which doesn't usually follow stepping down or retiring, I think was his phrase. Danny White is now the athletic director. Not really been seen or heard a lot in either case because he wasn't connected to the first one, but he was the pitcher of record here, was he not, in terms of running that athletic department?
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is Danny White's watch, Donde Plowman's watch, ostensibly Josh Heupel's, although there's no indication of, the coaching staff actually being involved. We don't know enough about what the allegations are to know, on whose desk all of this will rest. But in terms of the administrators in charge, yes, this is a Danny White issue and a Donde Plowman issue.
And Pat, what can you direct us a little bit more we saw in the Florida case a couple of days ago or weeks ago, it involved the quarterback who got away. Do we have a pretty good understanding what this centers around?
No specifics there, but I think it stands to reason they got a very high-profile commitment from a five-star quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, who was a freshman on the team this last year and is expected to be the starter and expected to be a star at quarterback. And there were all kinds of stories about, what his NIL haul was. Now, what was true, what was not true, what was, orchestrated or came through the Spire Group and what didn't, we don't know for sure. But presumably that's what the NCAA has been looking into for several months here on this case.
But, the idea that Nico is involved makes a lot of people a little nervous, considering he may be the key to Tennessee's future. Any reason to be concerned about where he stands or sits in all this?
Well, in theory, Paul, anybody who has signed an NIL agreement, if they go back and find problems with it, could those athletes be facing sanctions? In theory, yes. Whether it's suspensions, whether it's, you have to repay money, whatever the case may be. But as you pointed out, trying to predict what the NCAA will do is, a complete fool's errand. They are the most unpredictable entity on earth, and sometimes what they do makes sense, and sometimes it makes no sense. And so if I were Tennessee fans, I would be nervous and I would be watchful, but I wouldn't sit there and say, "Oh my gosh, we're doomed" or anything like that. I think you got to let this play out, and the cake could be baking for quite a while. And this, especially if Tennessee's going to turn this into a long pitched battle back and forth.
Yeah, and Pat, back to the Donde Plowman statement. It seemed like they were trying to put some distance and also trying to call some attention on themselves for acting properly in that case. And I think the jury is really out. Not that they did the wrong thing. It was nice to see somebody do the right thing. And we've mentioned that many times in interviews with Chancellor Plowman. But the real question is, what is the NCAA capable of as we pull the lens back and try to examine and maybe better understand what they've done in other instances? Do they still have any teeth?
That's a great question. And do we know? Not really. Florida State did just get hit in an NIL case, and a coach was given a 3-game suspension. A booster was disassociated, but the chance for the team to play the 2024 season remains completely intact. Michigan, we don't know where those cases stand. Those are not NIL cases, but there are major cases there. With Jim Harbaugh leaving, does that mean they can't issue sanctions that maybe would have been more directed at the head coach? We don't know. It was, I thought, extremely instructive last year in July when the NCAA did not apply a postseason ban to Tennessee after saying it was one of the worst infractions cases they'd ever seen, and in which their rule book said they were required to apply a postseason ban. But they cited exemplary cooperation, and they cited changing attitudes within the membership towards bans that penalized players who weren't there and weren't involved at the time of the infractions. So what does that mean here? This would be pretty extraordinary for a school to have a second major infractions case right on top of the other one, and that could leave you vulnerable to big sanctions. But do they have the teeth to apply a postseason ban? I don't know. They say it's still a part of their rules book, but will they apply one ever again? I don't know.
And Pat, that to me is the most interesting thing. If we went back 25 years, everybody would be pulling their hair out right now, because this would put them literally in the teeth of the most heinous NCAA penalty there could be. But that was a long time ago, and the last time I even heard that mention was by the chairman of the Committee on Infraction in the Alabama case, I believe, in 2002. But this is such a different era, but and just interpretation here is all we can possibly do. But if there was ever a school that could be in harm's way, would you agree or disagree that Tennessee could be in it because of the prior problems?
Yes, I would say so. And again, in theory, what we're talking about here, when rubber hits the road in an infractions hearing and with lawyers breathing down their necks, would they still? But in terms of opening yourself up to get slammed, go ahead and have another major infractions case while you're still trying to figure out the one that's going on right now. So, yes, this is a bad compilation of events for Tennessee for sure. But what will they lead to? I'm not going to guess at this point.
Yeah, and that's really the hard part, because we're in a different era with the NCAA, and nobody likes these people.
Yeah.
And that's probably why Donde Plowman went scorched earth, because you can, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think everybody looks at the NCAA now and says, we're not scared of you, and we're going to fight back at anything you try to do to us. You're lacking credibility. You're lacking enforcement power. And so bring it on. And I think that's very much looks to be Tennessee's likely approach to this as things unfold.
Meanwhile, and I don't have a lot of time, you wrote about Ross Bjork going from A&M to Ohio State recently, and there's not a fan in America who didn't just lose their eyebrows from raising them so much when they had that haul a couple of weeks ago of Caleb Downs and Sayin and Judkins, but Tennessee's being investigated, right?
That's how it works. We'll say, look, we're not dealing with an association that works on immediacy, okay? So the Tennessee stuff has been under investigation for who knows how long. It's going to take a while. Like, take a number, Ohio State. Give me something.